Large language models changed the game. And one of the biggest surprises was just how far simple scaling could take us. Make the model bigger, give it more data, train for longer, and performance just keeps rising across reasoning, coding, and language. But that kind of progress comes with a massive price tag. Training modern models can take tens of thousands of GPUs running for weeks. Right now, only a handful of organizations can afford to operate at that scale. So naturally, people started asking, is there a way to open this up? That's where decentralized training comes in. Instead of one company owning all the hardware, many independent people or organizations can contribute their compute, share the cost, and train a model together. It's a powerful idea, but it also introduces a very real problem: trust. In a centralized run, one team controls everything: the data, the code, the machines. In a decentralized run, nobody sees the full system. Each participant only handles their own small slice of computation. And at each pipeline boundary, they pass intermediate tensors, the forward activations, and the backward activation gradients to the next person in the chain. And that exchange is exactly where things can go wrong. A malicious or faulty worker can quietly tamper with the values they send. And because pipeline parallel training works stage by stage, even tiny perturbations early on can get amplified downstream, making it extremely hard to know which worker actually caused the issue. Before we can fix the trust problem, we need to understand the threat landscape. In a pipeline parallel setup, a model is split into stages, meaning the forward activations and the backward gradients become attack surfaces. In practice, attackers don't need advanced techniques. They can corrupt activations or gradients using simple transformations: constants, random values, scaling, random sign flips, biased noise, delays, or more subtle invisible noise that sits right near the edge of the distribution. Even these primitive manipulations, if left unchecked, can meaningfully bias the model's updates. And unlike data parallel training, where you can compare gradients across many replicas, pipeline parallel training doesn't allow global comparisons. Each stage processes a different part of the model, so there cannot be a global check for a pipeline parallel protocol. Therefore, verification has to be local, between neighboring stages, and it has to understand how errors cascade through the model. This gap is exactly why existing robustness techniques simply don't work here, and it's what motivated our method. We introduce Sentinel, stage-wise integrity verification for decentralized pipeline parallel training. Instead of relying on cryptographic proofs or redundant computation, Sentinel adds a lightweight verifier node between every pair of pipeline stages. Its job is simple: monitor what healthy training looks like and catch deviations early, before they corrupt the model. Each verifier maintains exponential moving averages, EMAs, of the activations and gradients it has recently seen. These serve as rolling baselines. When a batch flows forward, the next stage sends its activation to the verifier. Inside the verifier, the activation is checked with momentum-based monitoring against an exponential moving average, the EMA. And we compute a set of deviation metrics, M, mean absolute difference, L1, normalized Euclidean distance, L2, sliced Wasserstein distance, SWD, and sign flip ratio, SFR. The thresholds for these metrics are adaptively calibrated using IQR statistics via Tukey fences over a rolling history of valid deviations. If every metric is within bounds, we update the EMA and forward the activation to stage S+1. If any single metric is out of bounds, we skip the EMA update for this sample, increment that worker's violation counter by 1, and mark the batch as tainted by upstream. All downstream verifiers are notified to ignore this tainted batch and pause their deviation statistics for it to avoid cascading false positives. The activation still proceeds downstream. Once the loss is computed, the cycle reverses into the backward pass. Verifiers now monitor activation gradients flowing upstream and apply the exact same metric set, M, but with parameters tuned for greater variability, separate EMA momentum for gradients, and looser Tukey bounds. If all metrics pass, we update the gradient EMA and forward the original incoming gradient upstream. If a gradient fails any metric, we increment the same violation counter again. It is shared across forward and backward checks at this stage. Mark the batch tainted if it is not already. Notify upstream verifiers to ignore this tainted batch. And substitute the stored EMA gradient in place of the current gradient before passing it on. You can think of this as EMA substitution or EMA rollback. Of course, not all violations are malicious, so the violation counter includes a forgiveness mechanism. Long stretches of clean behavior gradually reduce the counter. But if the counter ever reaches 5 violations, the node is removed from the protocol. And if a node sends values that aren't just slightly off, but far outside the acceptable range, we treat that as clear malicious behavior and bypass the counter entirely. That node is banned immediately. In both directions, Sentinel only intervenes when metrics show statistically abnormal behavior. Otherwise, training proceeds exactly as normal. This prevents honest workers from being penalized for temporary noise while still removing persistently harmful participants. This simple forward and backward verification loop is enough to catch large corruptions early, bound the influence of small ones, and maintain stability in large, untrusted networks. Sentinel catches the large, harmful ones immediately. And if an attacker wants to evade detection, then by definition, they're forced to keep their perturbations small. If you make tiny, undetectable changes, the mathematics guarantees you can only nudge the parameters a little. We evaluated Sentinel across more than 75 attack scenarios, ranging from minor perturbations to fully malicious behaviors, using Llama 3 models up to 1.2 billion parameters, with a 1,000-step warm-up before verification kicked in. Even under these conditions, Sentinel kept the training curves almost identical to the clean baseline. And here's what stood out. First, activation attacks are just as dangerous as gradient attacks. This wasn't obvious before, but in pipeline parallel training, they can be equally crippling, so you really do have to watch both directions. Second, some attacks only matter in one domain. For example, invisible noise barely moves the gradients, but completely derails activations. Sentinel caught these differences reliably. Third, when an attack stays below the threshold, it can't do meaningful damage. The model's parameters only drift into a tiny neighborhood around the optimum, exactly what the theory predicts. We even embedded Sentinel into the Swarm training protocol, where workers connect over a decentralized DHT, can join or leave at any time, and the whole system is far noisier. Despite all that chaos, Sentinel still behaved consistently. Strong attacks were caught fast, and small attacks stayed bounded. Across larger models, larger meshes, mixed attacks, and fully decentralized swarm environments, the takeaway is the same. Sentinel keeps decentralized pipeline parallel training stable, even when almost half your workers are trying to break it. Sentinel turns decentralized pipeline parallel training from trust and hope into check and know. It doesn't require cryptographic machinery or duplicating compute. Instead, it learns what healthy signals look like, adapts its thresholds to keep false alarms low, and stops error cascades the moment they start. Repeat offenders can be isolated without breaking the system, making collaboration safer. And once every participant's behavior is monitored and bounded, new incentive structures become possible, opening the door to broader, more inclusive training ecosystems.